And now I'm going to take you guys through a bit more of an advanced Charge with Light build, a bit more fleshed out that takes everything in our build into play. So first off, the first thing whenever you want to do whenever you're going to make a very fleshed out synergistic build is identify what exotic you're going to be using. And for this exotic, we're going to be using Necrotic Grip, and I'm looking especially in content with high amounts of trash ads. So, Necrotic Grip, what it does is if you hit something with a melee, it poisons them. That does increasing damage, and this is great because the damage scales, so it slowly ticks up and does more and more damage over time. When you defeat that poison combatant, the poison spreads, and this will chain, and you'll get a bunch of poison ticks, and it can wipe huge groups of enemies. So, the only problem with this is you have to get into melee range. So, to kind of circumvent that, we're going to be using Shadebinder with the Penumbral Brass melee. Because it's ranged, and for other reasons that we'll see shortly. So, then we run into the problem, we want to have this melee up as much as possible. So, we can kind of help that melee uptime through the Shadebinder class itself. So the most important part of this build, I'd say, new aspect that was added this season. So this aspect, when you freeze a target, it creates stasis shards around the frozen targets. Higher tier combatants create more shards. Now these stasis shards, what they do is when you pick them up, they give you 10% melee energy each. So, we're like, okay, so we're going to freeze people. How do we get more freezing? We get ice flare bolts. So whenever you shatter a frozen target, spawns more seekers, which frees more targets. So good synergy here for creating a lot of shards. Next, let's look at our fragments real quick. We have Whisper of Fractures, and this one I'm planning on swapping out for the new fragment that gives you overshield when you pick up stasis shards, because you really don't need this at all. You don't need this at all with the amount of melee regen you have through this whole build. So this one isn't really needed, but it kind of helps. You just have to be really, really close to the enemies, and that's not always ideal. This one's pretty nice. Nearby stasis shards track your position. It's nice so you can stay back a bit still, and you can still get those stasis shards, and also gives you a nice little stat boost there. Whisper of Hunger is probably the most important one. So increases the melee energy shards. This takes you up from 10% per shard to 20%. So, if you freeze, say, a champion, you create 3 shards, and that gives you 60% of your melee back if you have this fragment on, which is huge. It's so good. You get stat penalties, but trust me, it's worth it. And then lastly, we have Hedrons here, which gives you a weapon damage bonus after freezing a target with stasis, which is all around great perk. Next, we're going to look at our weapons. We have 7 Seraph Officer Revolver, which is just one of my favorite PvE hand cannons in the game. Really, really solid. We have Salvager's Salvo, which is also really, really good. You don't really need to be using Salvager's Salvo, and I think you could probably swap it out for the new fusion rifle with the loaded question perk. That could really work, but it's also nice because, you know, double grenade launchers means you can benefit from like scavs and grenade launcher ammo finder, and you only need one, which is really, really nice. And then we're using Anarchy because Anarchy is life. So, through our class, we have a way that if we're consistently freezing, we have a fairly easy way to get our melee back, because we're also using Cold Snap Grenade, which means we throw a Cold Snap, it can give us back our whole melee, basically. But, also, I forgot to mention, with Glacial Harvest, so red bars will give you 1 stasis shard, orange bars will give you 2, so 40%, and then yellow bars or champions will give you 3, so 60%. So how do we kind of fill in that percent? Well, we have Heavy Handed, which when charged with light, regain half your melee ability when you use the charged melee, consuming 1 stack with charged with light. So this is fantastic, right? This means that we have a way to consistently get half of our melee back whenever we're charged with light. Then comes the question of, well, how do we consistently stay charged with light? And the answer to that is Blast Radius, and that's why we're using a grenade launcher. Now, of course, there's other mods like this for different weapons, right here. Quick charge works really well too. Say if you want to use Telesto or the new loaded question fusion-esque thing. But we're going to be using blast radius because it's three energy charge, and that's cheap and works great. So blast radius, and we have heavy-handed. So now what else do we want to have? We have stacks with stacks. So what this does is whenever you get like a double kill with your grenade launcher, and you have enough time to shoot a grenade launcher shot, get one kill, reload, shoot another one, and get another kill, and that'll charge you with light. That'll give you 2 stacks, and that's 2 melee throws for 2 grenade launchers. And then next we have charged up, so you can hold an extra stack, and then we have charged up again, so you can hold another stack, and that's kind of just because like there's one mod, supercharged, which gives you addition to 2 stacks in one mod, which is really nice. However, it's kind of hard to fit that in on here, so we're just gonna go with 2 charged up because we had a free slot anyway. And we have the other mods that you'd obviously see on grenade ammo finer because we're using double grenade launcher loader, and overload hand cannon just because champion mods. We have concussive and sniper damage resistance, and then we have grenade launcher scavenger. Better already is just slotted in there, and then we have heavy-handed and outreach. Outreach, gives us a bit more melee recharge. And so how this kind of whole build works is you'll say, throw out your melee, you'll hit a target, it'll freeze them, it'll generate a shard, and then the poison will break it, spreading the poison and the ice flare bolts to other enemies, creating more shards, and then spreading the poison, kind of killing a whole group. And you can usually get your melee back from that fairly easily. Another thing you can do is, well, first you'd want to get a kill or 2 with your grenade launcher, just shoot a salvo shot into a group. You'll be charged with light ×4 easily. And you can start going to town with the melee, freezing, da-da-da-da-da. Another thing you can do is whenever you freeze, increase your damage on salvage with salvo. So sometimes the poison doesn't always proc, so you shoot out your melee, you freeze a few people. You can shoot the grenade launcher to clean them up, and because they're frozen, they'll take extra damage from your grenade launcher. It'll wipe out whole groups. It's fantastic ad clear. And then you can also throw the cold snap for a similar thing to get more shards to get your melee back. This is really fun because for higher tier enemies like champions and stuff like that, you can keep them perma-frozen for quite a while. So since you have 4 charges, right? You have 4 charges of charge with light. What you can do, you melee, right, to freeze them the first time. You get half your melee back from heavy-handed. It'll generate 3 shards, so then it'll give you back your whole melee again. So then when you break it, and you can then throw your melee again, freezing the champion again. You can do that 4 times. And then you can throw your grenade, right? You get it back, etc., etc., etc. It's really fantastic, and it's a really fun build to use. But yeah, that's kind of a walkthrough of a bit more of an advanced charge with light build. Some of the fun things you can do with it. Highly recommend playing around with it. Kind of just, choose an exotic that maybe might get a bit more broken if you can always have one ability up a lot more, or kind of come up with a goal and then try and build around it with charge with light. But yeah.